on the phone Representative Tom McMillin from Rochester, Michigan. Now, Representative McMillin introduced in the Michigan House a bill that passed unanimously, 107-0, basically limiting some of the provisions of the NDAA Act. And that happened just 2 days after the Senate passed the new NDAA bill of 2013. So I want to get his take on that. Representative McMillin, thank you for joining us.
Sure. Thank you.
It's not too often you see a bill pass unanimously. That was pretty impressive to see both parties come together to take a stand for some aspects of liberty.
Absolutely. You know, when in the hearing that I had on my bill, I chair the committee it went through, and Justin Amash and the ACLU were sitting next to each other, and it's got left and right, people who really care about liberty are coming together on this.
Yeah. It shouldn't be a left-right issue. I mean, there shouldn't be any party that's against liberty and due process. But it was really distressing, I think, for a lot of us, including me, to see a nearly unanimous passage in the Senate of the NDAA bill last year. And they've walked that back a little bit. Just 2 days before your bill passed unanimously in the Michigan House, the Senate, the U.S. Senate, passed unanimously another NDAA bill, this time with a Feinstein amendment. And let me read you the text of that.
Sure.
It says, an authorization to use military force, a declaration of war, or any similar authority shall not authorize detention without charge or trial of a citizen or lawful permanent resident of the U.S. apprehended in the United States unless an act of Congress expressly authorizes such detention. What do you think about that? What's your take on that?
You know, and I'm sitting in the Michigan legislature. My close friend Justin Amash, I know I've read some things that he feels that unless, the NDAA is that unless. I mean, from what I can gather, and I heard the word similar. So I mean, it sounds to me like we and states need to continue to stand up and defend our citizens. So next year I'll be doing the same thing as I did this year, based on the information I can tell. They could still take away our due process. Right.
Yeah, his take on it was basically he thought it was a head fake, I think is what he actually wrote on Twitter or Facebook. Because it really doesn't, he pointed out that, well, the act of Congress that they're going to refer to is the authorization for the use of military force going all the way back to 2001, as well as the NDAA itself. Those are both acts of Congress. But I guess, what I had Stuart Rhodes on from Oath Keepers yesterday, and we were talking about this, and Stuart Rhodes's take on this is that it assumes powers for the Congress that they don't have. They don't have the right to pass an act that takes away our due process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that people like you and Amash and others are shining a bright light, so that people like myself and I hope every legislature should be standing up for their citizens in every state. But we've got to hit this thing head on before it just keeps expanding and eventually is used. So no, I agree that we got to be very particular and very loud and. I think my legislation, which is in the Senate, it's on second reading today, and it very well could pass. Tomorrow is our last day of the year, so I'd have to reintroduce next year. So we're trying to make sure it gets through.
Oh, so you don't think it will pass this year? It'll have to be reintroduced next year?
Well, it's on second. It came out of the Senate Judiciary Committee yesterday. Unanimously. It's on the Senate floor. I just talked to a senator who's getting phone calls from his constituents saying, get this thing passed, and it's on second reading on the agenda, so it very well could go through second and then final passage either today or tomorrow and hit the governor's desk.
Okay. Well, one of the things before we get off of the Feinstein-Lee amendment I thought was interesting was Rand Paul's proposed amendment was essentially a restating of the Sixth Amendment, stating that the Congress didn't think that was, basically getting that restated so people don't get the impression that the Congress thinks that they've repealed the Sixth Amendment, which a lot of us get the impression that they think they have. And I think it's interesting that his amendment that just restated the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution was not the one that they voted on. It was this much weaker one from Feinstein, which basically it didn't do anything to protect us from posse comitatus or the military acting as police. It didn't do anything to guarantee due process for persons. It just talked about citizens, but the Constitution talks about any persons.
Sure.
So there's a lot of issues with this Feinstein amendment, very, very weak compared to the Rand Paul statement. And it's interesting that the Senate shied away from endorsing the Sixth Amendment.
Yeah, you know, we saw this last year, I think, when, you know, Justin and others made a big deal about the 2012 NDAA. There was an amendment that basically did nothing, and everybody went home and said we did something. And I actually talked to a congressman who from Michigan who had voted no initially, but then said, well, with that amendment, I was fine. But, you know, you see this a lot where there's, you know, cover that they think that, you know, they pass a meaningless amendment, and then they can claim that they've stood up for freedom. So it's when we got people like yourselves and Justin and others, it's able to make sure that people understand what's really going on.
Yes, exactly. Now the bill that you've got, is that House Bill number 5768?
Yes.
Okay, I'm looking at the text of that, and what that bill says is basically that no agency of the state, employees or political subdivision or Michigan National Guard members would help the armed forces of the U.S. in any investigation, prosecution, or detention of any person. So
based on that section of the NDAA, right?
Yes, right.
Yep.
As long as it's, yeah, exactly. So now, is there anything in the bill that would prohibit or penalize any federal actors if they violate the rights of Michigan citizens? In other words, does this interpose the state of Michigan to protect the rights of Michigan citizens if the federal government steps over the bounds of the Constitution?
You know, I didn't, and I know there's other states trying to get something like that through. I think it's Missouri or somebody, but I don't know that could have gotten through. I really patterned it after Virginia. I was able to say, look, Virginia, the governor signed it, so it's not that radical. It's we're merely saying that our sheriffs and our police and our authorities are not going to assist in doing this, and that's as far as we went.
Right. So they're not going to assist, but they're not put in a position where they need to resist. That's
Yeah, I mean, I hear you and I understand the interest, but it's one thing to say we're not going to assist, and it's another thing to say that we're going to lock up federal agents. And I think that's there's going to need to be more groundswell of support if there's an interest in going that direction.
I understand. Well, we'll see what will happen, because we've got a bill that's going to be introduced here in Texas by a state representative that actually does that. It does interpose the state as protecting the state, the citizens of Texas against federal encroachment. And he basically goes back and references habeas corpus, posse comitatus, as well as about 5 or 6 amendments of the U.S. Constitution that the NDAA and the authorization of the use of military force kind of attack, essentially, directly. Well, I really appreciate.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. But I'm thinking in Texas, the TSA, they tried to do that and couldn't get it through. So I hope it'll be interesting to see the debate, because I have a TSA bill similar to where you're going to basically say that you will lock up people that are assaulting citizens. So it'll be interesting to see the debate there in Texas.
Right. Yeah. There's actually exactly. There's a there's 2 criminal provisions in there. One of them is 1 year and $10,000. The other is 6 months and $5,000. So they've got some teeth in it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And actually, the TSA bill is coming back as well. So we got both a TSA bill and we've got an NDAA bill. So we're not giving up down here. Now, you said you've got a TSA bill that's coming up. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, no, it's still in committee. I've been trying to get it out of judiciary, but it's it's patterned after, I think, Texas or others. So we'll be watching, and it certainly is helpful when one state moves in a direction and others can say, look, this is what that state's doing. So I'll be watching closely.
Yeah, the TSA bill got a lot of support when it was in the House. It was some shenanigans that were played by the lieutenant governor and the governor's office once it went to the Senate. So, initially it looked like it was going to pass in the Senate as well last time. But he's also added some provisions in it this time to protect children, because that's something that's a real concern. And David Simpson, the representative that put that in, was talking about it, got really touched about a case of an autistic child who was taken away from his parents and started screaming "man on boy." It's just horrible, the kinds of things that our government feels like they can subject us to at this point.
Yep. I agree.
So, well, I certainly wish you luck in getting both of these bills through and moving the ball a little bit in that direction. However far we can get it, we'll take it and keep coming after them.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your work. Thank you. Well, it'll be interesting to see what